He wasn't the tallest, he wasn't the fastest, but what Steve Nash had couldn't be measured in inches or seconds. He had vision, precision, heart, and he changed the game forever.
Township is an area of land designated to the black people during apartheid to segregate them from the white Afrikaners. I saw these kids playing soccer in the street and I stopped to have a kick around with them.
He's such a charismatic guy, you know, his personal.
We visited his childhood home in Gordon Head and even got a glimpse of the chain link fence that he would hop over when he was a young boy and his elementary school at Hillcrest. And then we also had the opportunity to go to St. Michael's University here in Victoria, where Steve played a few years basketball, and he was highly regarded and recognized on that team, and also voted the MVP in his graduating
all the parts
year.
were there for him.
Victoria is very proud to call itself home to Steve Nash, and you don't have to walk very far.
And some of his best friends to this day are still people on that team. I only saw him as an extremely confident and capable player. And I think that, you know, maybe that first year that, you know, if he was doing anything, it was taking away a few of the sort of unnecessarily fancy edges to his game. I mean, he was so good, he could almost like fool around and toy with things on the court. I've never seen anybody in any sport work as hard as him. But I think it also, so you have the...
We're proud to call him one of our own.
Steve Nash, one of the best ever.
There's never been a player like him. The guy is the most incredible player we've seen ever in the NBA.
Steve Nash was a wizard with the basketball.
He can do a lot of stuff on the court that a normal person couldn't do.
Steve Nash is just phenomenal.
What a magician with the ball.
He might be the most unassuming looking superstar in NBA history.
Canadians should be very proud of Steve Nash. He's one of the great point guards in the history of the game.
There are great guards and there are all-time great guards. Steve Nash would be an all-time great.
Yep, I agree with that. He didn't come in killing the game, but eventually he took over the game.
All right, let's go.
Steve Nash, listed at 6'1". He's got a slight build, but his game is big. In fact, some have gone as far as to suggest that Steve Nash is the best high school player this province has ever seen.
I just kind of don't believe it. I mean, look at all those players that have played in the past year. I don't really put myself on the same level as them. I just try to play as well as I can and try to add a dimension to my game every time I play. A lot of focus has been on me this year. I'm not exactly sure why.
Every story, no matter how sweeping, has to start somewhere. And the best stories often have the most unlikely beginnings. There could be almost no place further from where Steve Nash went than where Steve Nash began. Victoria, BC, an unlikely basketball hotbed.
A key step in his development was
one of the guys who was working for Basketball Canada, Peter Montopoli, was standing watching with me, and I said, "You see that little skinny guy out there?" He says, "Yeah, I had."
Sometimes fate smiles, even when it's stormy. Nash had a big dream. He wanted to play Division I basketball in the U.S.
The recruiting option of Canadians in the United States is a lot different.
University, the only D1 program recruiting him. There were no guarantees, but it was a chance all Nash ever wanted. At a turning point, Nash got the guidance he needed from a friend who put Steve's interests ahead of his own.
I got to know him pretty well because obviously from the 10th grade, right, we started chatting. He said, "What would you do if you were in my position?" I said, "I would try to play at the NCAA level, aim at the highest level possible."
I think once he realized that Santa Clara were actively pursuing him and were very interested in him, he wasn't going to let that chance slip by.
Steve is from British Columbia. The assistants told us yesterday they went to check him out. They watched him play for about 10 minutes, and they started looking around the gym going like, is anybody else here?
There's one that slipped through the cracks.
First time I saw Steve play was Peyton. I mean, there was kind of a very rich ground for guards, and you could tell he was a pretty special talent.
One of my first broadcasts as a color analyst, I got a chance to do a Santa Clara game. And there was all this talk about Steve Nash, whether he was going to make it to the NBA, and I was like, I don't know whether he's going to make it or not, but I'd like to be the recipient of some of those passes.
He dropped dimes all day long. For the most part, it was too much Steve Nash.
When he first got to Santa Clara, he got to work, sharpening his skills. Nash helped the Broncos to the NCAA tournament as a freshman. By the time Nash was a senior, the unknown from Victoria was one of the best players in the country. And suddenly, the NBA seemed like a reality.
Nash really looks forward to being on a stage like this.
We had Kevin Johnson at the time that was getting a little long in the tooth, and the timing was right for us to bring in a young point guard.
Although he was playing a lot of minutes, you could even argue starters minutes, with Jason Kidd there for the foreseeable future, it was going to be hard to pay him starters money as a point guard.
When I was in Phoenix, I was on the receiving end of the Jason Kidd trade, which turned Steve from a backup to a third backup behind two future All-Stars at the time. And so being a third backup point guard and Steve still finding himself, provided an opportunity for us to, make a draft trade.
We found a couple of scenarios that we thought might work. One.
Dallas Mavericks. After Don and Donnie Nelson made a pair of trades, Dallas came away with two franchise cornerstones in Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki.
I think that kind of was a little lucky on draft night when they got both of us at the same time.
First impressions aside, Nash and Nowitzki developed a bond on and off the court that will outlast their careers.
I thought he was a weirdo, with bad hair, but we started hanging out. He took me out a little bit, and I could just see, this. What he did for me early, and for a long, long time, he was my best friend.
Nash finally had his own team, a contract that set him up financially for life. But he was playing in pain, and for the first time in his career, struggling with his confidence.
Steve had some back problems, and then Melly obviously gave him the extension, gave him a nice contract. And that's all his fans really saw. That he's making a good amount of money, and he's just not producing as much as we want.
Like so many times in his journey, it was one step forward, two steps back. Except this time, it came with a diss track and a chorus of 20,000 singing the same song.
Every time he touched the ball in his home jersey in Dallas, he was getting booed. And it really bothered him a lot.
It was tougher as a friend than as a teammate because I know the injuries that he was trying to play through. I just felt bad when the crowd was booing him because they didn't know the whole story. They just saw a guy come from Phoenix, did a lot of money, and who wasn't producing to what his contract was saying.
There was a lot of frustrations, I think, on both sides. But sometimes you have to go to rock bottom, to push through and believe in yourself.
I just knew that that day would come when those same fans that was booing him would be cheering for him.
Solved his injury issues, forged a connection with Nowitzki and Finley, and helped the Mavericks become one of the best offensive teams in the NBA. By his third season in Dallas, they won 53 games and their first playoff series. Nowitzki became an all-star, and his point guard was the engine driving it all.
You had a great point guard, you had a big man who was transferring the game, and you had a throw-in like myself. Although we came up short on that ultimate goal, I always thought that if that team was together for an extended period of time, that we would at least have one championship in Dallas.
I always think sometimes what could have been if Steve would have stayed here. Unfortunately, it didn't happen that way.
Even as an all-star, driving the league's best offense, there were still doubters. And the Mavericks opted to let Nash hit free agency.
I thought Steve would be a perfect fit for us because we needed a point guard. And so we traveled to Dallas to meet with Steve. And at the time, I think Mark Cuban was flirting with signing Shaq or re-signing Steve. And we were like, man, if we can just kind of get Steve now while Dallas is uncertain, it'd be the perfect situation for us.
It gave us confidence to step into free agency that year and put ultimately $66 million on the table.
One thing led to another, and we ended up signing Steve, and I was super excited.
You know, I left here somewhat begrudgingly, only because I love the organization and the city. And to be able to come back under these circumstances is just fantastic, and I think it's a perfect circle for me.
I didn't know how great Steve was until he got to Phoenix. And then when I realized, like, this guy's the real deal.
Pretty stuff. Steve Nash behind the back. Nash picks up a dime.
The creativity of Steve Nash is just mind-boggling.
Not only has a great imagination, but the ability to pull it off.
Steve Nash is just phenomenal.
What a magician with the ball. It just exploded, and Steve was perfect. And perfect timing, and we had perfect teammates around him, so it was the best of all worlds.
Nobody ever envisioned Nash as an MVP-type player until he and Mike D'Antoni got together in Phoenix.
We totally revolutionized the game. We created this offense called 7 seconds or less.
Before the Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Warriors, the template for that really was the 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns.
D'Antoni was all about pace, all about pace, pushing the ball on, get the shot in 7 seconds or less, constantly applying offensive pressure. His whole objective was to completely weight up the game.
By the time we got to the third quarter, teams were like, time, going timeout.
He had the perfect fit around him with Coach D'Antoni's system, with the athletes, with Stoudemire rolling, with some of their shooters. It just couldn't have been more perfect for what Steve brought.
He took advantage of whatever the defense gave him. If you back off him and shoot the jumper. If you're up close and tight, he's gonna go around and make the play. If you help off this guy from the corner, he's gonna make the correct pass. And the pass is gonna be right on the dime. You know, those fundamental skills, point guards have to somewhat re-embody because it allows players to really become better players. And it allows your team to become great.
There are great guards and there are all-time great guards. Steve Nash would be an all-time great.
I agree with that.
When he was playing here, I would have never thought he can be a back-to-back MVP. But like I said, he was phenomenal there, and I was happy for him and proud of him.
Nash is just amazing. You know, every night he'd come out there and he'd just come at you.
It was tough playing against Steve Nash, just a magician with the ball.
His God-given talent is enormous.
No one existed in the game that could do what he did night in and night out.
I would have paid to have stayed and played with Steve Nash. I've loved watching Steve Nash play.
It was fun to watch him play. Not always when I was on the other side, but it was fun watching.
While his NBA career was unfolding, his enthusiasm for his country, for his flag, never diminished. Maybe it was growing up in a soccer household or a hockey nation, but for him, playing his sport while wearing Canada's colors was always the ultimate expression of his passion.
Representing my country was the proudest and most emotional moment of my career.
A vision shared almost a decade earlier, while passing time in a ferry terminal, finally came true at the 2000 Olympics in Sydney.
We were marching into the opening ceremonies. We had our arms around each other.
Fun playing with him,
and always knew you had a chance to win.
Just to see what he did during the time where he went to the Olympics and how it affected the country, you know, that's the reason I started to play, and that's the reason I love playing for Team Canada so much, you know, today.
I've been trying to visualize that and imagine that feeling of having Canada across your chest
and is still shaping the sport.
That ultimately, you know, hit the pros in a way that you wouldn't have anticipated any of this, but it was what he did from that point forward that put him at that MVP level status, that put him at that Hall of Fame status. It didn't happen by accident.
I'll say it because I'm
back to the game as much as he needs to change the game when he was playing.
I don't have time here to describe Steve how good Steve Nash was, man. Honestly, in such a short interview, that's not possible. I need maybe like 2 or 3 days.
He didn't come in killing the game, but eventually he took over the game.